is this idea that you're making a declaration or a statement of your identity in some way. It could be coming out with your gender identity, with your sexual orientation, with your gender expression, a number of those things, some sort of combination, all of them, or none if it's privately to yourself. And I think it's historically been very important to the queer community because these have been identities that have not been encouraged to be seen. They have been invisible identities on purpose that society or structures in society have oppressed purposefully. So the concept of coming out was extremely and is still extremely important for people because it's this defiance in a way of this oppressive structure. I think personally I have a sort of a complicated relationship with coming out because I think the idea that queer people have to come out, or people in the LGBTQIA+ community have to come out, is inherently a concept that others them, because there are so many people in the world who don't have to come out because their identities have not been oppressed or are currently not oppressed. So it's complex, and it may be important to some and not as important to others, but it's like this declaration of your identity, generally speaking, that makes people feel like I'm seen and I'm taking control of my narrative, I think, in some way. That's a really great question. So I think coming out can have an extremely positive impact on someone's confidence. I think that coming out could also have a really negative impact on their self-confidence. It kind of depends on how it's received in the communities in which it is presented. So I think in certain communities where a person comes out, or an individual that they may come out to, if they accept it and it's validated and it's embraced, I think that can provide that person a lot of peace of mind, and they find that acceptance that they might have been seeking. On the contrary, there are so many times when people come out and it does not go the way they planned, or perhaps it does go the way they planned, but the way they had expected, but they thought maybe there was some potential for things going better. So I think it can be a double-edged sword for queer people. It can be formative and constructive for their identity and their sense of place in their community and in their society, but it can also be destructive. So it's contentious, but it can help people as they make a statement and as they declare who they are and they start to take control of their narrative. It can help them form their identity and sort of solidify that, and it becomes more concrete, which I think also, it's all this continuum of maybe, ands, if, but. That's also a hard topic to broach because the buckets or the categories that people are exposed to may not be as rich as their actual experiences. So they may come out as one thing and they tend to solidify their identity in that because that's who they believe they are, but as they live in that new identity, they realize I'm not exactly this thing that I came out as. I don't necessarily identify completely with this community. It's a little more nuanced than that, and I'm a little bit more over here. And it creates sometimes a friction, this cognitive dissonance where people say, well, I came out as this thing, but it's not quite right. But when I came out, I didn't have the right language for it because it wasn't something I was exposed to. It wasn't something I had any experience with people in my life. So though it can help them solidify their identity, it can also help them learn more about what's out there because potentially they're becoming exposed to other people who are living different truths that sort of flavor their experience a little more, and so it can develop their identity even further in a way. Oh my, it's another one of those positive and potentially negative things because, as I'm sure we've all seen, in many observances there are communities and groups and individuals who support the observances, and there are others who do not, for many different reasons. So for young people who see people for the first time supporting them and supporting folks who live like them and love like them and experience the world similarly to the way they do. I think that can be extremely empowering. And it can also be extremely fear-inducing when they see protests and violence around these observances and these months and these events that are happening during these months and these concerted efforts of violence specifically targeted at events during Pride Month. So I think it's extremely formative in a number of ways. But that's sort of the way life is. You know, you find connection with the community because not only do you have shared positive experiences, but because you also have shared struggles. And so that can also help you identify more with that community. So regardless of the potential detriment that these acts of violence or protest may have on young people, ultimately I think it's a positive thing for them that we have this time dedicated for people to really think about the history of this community and where this community might be going. So I think despite all of that, it's very formative in a positive way, I hope, overall for young queer people. Oh, I have to preface this by saying not everyone has access to some of the things that I think are important. So it kind of breaks my heart in a way to say what I'm going to say. But I think at least finding one person that you trust, that you can confide in, that you can talk it out with is extremely important. And I know, at least from my lived experience, there were many years when I was alone navigating that. And you know, this was during the days of AOL Instant Messenger, so there were, you know, chat rooms for people who were experiencing the same thing as me, but those were like faceless robot people who I didn't know them. I didn't know if they really were like me, and so it was nice to know that there were other people seeking that, but there was still this void of a human interaction with someone who had the same words for an experience that we shared, or they had words for an experience that I had but I didn't know how to describe. So finding some way to connect with someone, I think, is a powerful way to navigate the queer experience. Sometimes finding examples of yourself in media can really help because, especially as a young queer person, you don't often, or at least I didn't often, see a successful model of myself in media or in teachers or in my parents or my caregivers or their communities. So I didn't have a vision of what a successful future for someone like me looked like. What jobs do they do? How do they navigate the world? What kind of car do they drive? I mean, I had no idea what these people did. So to find someone who you identify with, who is successful, whatever that means to you, can be a powerful experience, you know, whether it be in a book, you know, it might be a news anchor or someone on Twitter who is living openly, can be really, really powerful. My journal's my best friend. You know, sometimes you can connect with people, but you can't always connect with people. It's really important to be able to be there for yourself in certain times. So I think that's a way that can help people navigate this. And as much as I have a contentious relationship with social media, that can be a powerful way to see that there are other people like me. Even if you don't reach out to someone, you see that your experience is not, might not sound the way I mean it. Your experience is not unique. There are other people out there who are going through the same thing. You are not alone. A lot of us have been there, done that, got the t-shirt, threw it in the garbage, we don't need it anymore, we don't want to look at it anymore, okay? So that can be another way to cope with this sometimes difficult experience of being a queer person. I think about this question a lot. So for people out there who maybe haven't yet started a career, or they have a dream of being in a place where they don't see a lot of queer people being successful, but that's something that's important to them, is to be in that place. And they want to make a difference, or maybe they don't want to make a difference, but they just want to be there. I think it's important to give yourself a break very often, and to remember that you don't have to change the world on your own. We are all part of making a difference, but the weight of making that difference can be shared. It is not just your responsibility. So do what you can and be brave. Do things like taking an interview when you feel a little nervous about it, but understand that your capacity is limited, and you have to care for yourself in order to make the change that you desire or that you think is important to make. When your battery is empty and you're missing a lot of deadlines, or you're not being there for yourself, it's difficult to make a change in your workplace or in your community, because your livelihood, your physical well-being, your mental well-being is extremely important in your ability to make an impact on those around you. So understand that you don't have to do it alone, which I know is frustrating when you feel like you are alone. So do what you can, cut yourself a break, get some sleep, have a good meal, do your yoga, whatever, resets your mind and your body. Get up and do it again tomorrow. Or not, maybe the next day. Maybe take a mental vacation from being the warrior that you might need to be, so that you can come back another day, whenever that is, and do more good work. I feel like sometimes people are pressured to come out, or they feel this internal pressure to come out before they are ready. And especially in the, 15 years now that I have been out, it's changing so rapidly. Even, when I was a teenager and first navigating that, actually, it was well before I was a teenager, but things were different. I mean, I had the friends on my block. That was it. I had no cell phone. I didn't know that there were other kids at my school who were experiencing this. And later on, I got AIM, and I realized, oh my gosh, there are people out there like me. Wild. I'm not the only one going through this, and so that helped a little bit. But now I think there's this. There are so many people who have their voices heard on social media platforms, which I think is really powerful. But when you're at a really young age and you don't quite have the ability to filter out what is helpful to you and what maybe isn't helpful to you, it can feel like there's this pressure to do things the way that other people do them. And I want to encourage young people to take it at your own pace. There are people out there who it is absolutely not safe to come out. They fear for their life. And if they don't fear for their life, they fear for violence. If they don't fear for violence, they fear for being socially ostracized. If they don't fear for that, they fear that their car is going to get bashed in. They fear that there'll be another Matthew Shepard situation. These tragedies happen all the time, where people living their true identity in public results in tragedy. So I think that contributes to why a lot of people are not out. So even beyond threats of violence or fear, I think, and I'm speaking from my personal experience, which may not be the same for everyone, your caregivers often influence what you think is acceptable and what is not acceptable as well. So if you were not raised in an environment that welcomes that identity, it can feel to quote Scream, the call's coming from inside the house. You know, this fear is coming from within. It's not necessarily outside. I have been raised that this is not okay. There's something not okay about me. I'm rejecting this thing, so I'm not going to come out. It might feel like an illness, or it might feel like something's wrong with me, and I don't want to accept it myself, so therefore I won't come out. Maybe because I'm rejecting it, or because I haven't quite acknowledged it yet. So that can be a part of it, but it's hard to say. It is really so multifaceted, and I'm not sure that it's right for everyone. I think I want everyone to do what makes them happy, and you know, for some people, it could cause them a lot of harm in their communities and in their situations. So I don't think that it's so difficult to land on an answer that works for everyone, because everyone's situation is so different. I wish we didn't have to come out. I wish this was not a necessity that our, structures have. Yeah, I wish the history of the queer community was not what it was in a way, even though I'm proud of that history, and I think that it's rich and it's amazing. I wish that people could feel confident living who they are openly, but for so many reasons I think it's just not right, at least right now, for some people. And I think in a lot of situations it's not my business to ask more about that, beyond what they're comfortable with, except to tell them by how I present myself and how I interact with the world that it's okay to open up to me. So, difficult question to answer. Well, the concept of allyship, I think, applies to a lot of communities. An allyship to different historically marginalized communities looks very different. But I think something that resonates with the general concept of allyship is moving beyond what you believe to reinforcing those beliefs with action. Whatever action you're comfortable with, whatever action is available to you, moving beyond, oh yes, I think that's the right thing to do, to, and here's what I'm going to do to reinforce that belief. So what we see a lot now, which I think is not new, is rainbow capitalism. People will change their profile picture and they don't explain why. They just put a rainbow filter on their profile picture, or they'll make a post and change their profile picture, and then for the rest of the month it's check out our Pride collection. But what about your Pride collection? Yes, I do want those rainbow sandals, okay, don't get me wrong, but why are you selling a Pride collection? Is it because you know that this is a fabulous time to market to people who might have expendable income, or people who have been saving all year for your new Pride collection and that's the one thing they're gonna buy all year that's out of their budget? Well, what are you gonna do with that money? Does that go to your shareholders? Does that go toward an effort to support the community with action somehow? Do you use that money to then donate money to political organizations that undermine the rights and the freedoms of the queer community? So beyond marketing, it's taking action. It's being in a march, and beyond being in a march, it's connecting with someone in that march who works for an organization that needs your volunteer hours. Or if you have the financial capacity to donate to a local organization that's making a grassroots effort to support the queer community, perhaps considering that. Donating books to organizations that need these resources. And I know from my experience, some of the most powerful allyship has been one-on-one allyship. Um, how can I be here for you? I mean, and then listening to the response to that and doing what you can from that. That could be listening to someone talk about how they were discriminated against at the workplace. And that might not be an experience that their other friends need to talk about, because that may not be happening to them. And so your allyship might be being able to listen openly without judgment to that. And if that person doesn't need anything else from you, that's what allyship looks like. If they are so lost and they don't know how to move on, but they don't feel safe going back home because there's a threat of violence from the people who live in their household. Allyship might look like helping them find resources, and not just identify those resources. You may help them call or reach out. So it's getting an understanding of what that person might need, or what that group or the organization might need from non-queer folks, and showing up for that. And not just showing up one time, because then the capacity is marginally increased for a tiny period of time. But it's showing up repeatedly to help increase the capacity of that effort, so that that person knows they're not alone, so that organization can actually do more, but not just during June. Because we have volunteers in a lot of organizations during June, but what about December? What about these extremely important times when we need people to call legislators or to be on the ground to support people at organizations like the Montrose Grace Place, who always needs volunteers, not just during June. So understanding what the need is and being there over a sustained period of time can be a good start to being an ally. I think so much of the queer experience is individual. I have many queer friends who have had experiences that I've never had, and vice versa. So it's often really hard to share advice, to share universal advice, because not everyone's experience is the same. So from my experience, it can feel really scary to be a young queer person. And who you are today might not be the same as who you were yesterday, or who you are right now might not be the same as who you were this morning when you were brushing your teeth. And I would venture to say that you're not the same person that you're going to be in 2 years, 5 years, 1 month. So don't feel like the decisions you make right now completely define you. Explore everything you can. Read everything you can. Go to events that you think are not for you and indulge yourself in them. Embarrass yourself. Experience things that will be formative to you, even if you're not sure where they fit into your story right now. They may fit into your story someday. And understand that it's okay to change. Whoever you think you are now might not be the person that you're ultimately becoming. 5 years ago, when I was an elementary school teacher, I would never have guessed that this is how I would be comfortable showing up to work every day. I don't think I would have felt safe showing up to work like this every day. This is who and how I feel the most comfortable. But I was figuring that out when I was starting my career maybe 6-7 years ago. And I think I felt like the decisions I were making had to be so concrete. And because I was often the only queer person in my groups, especially professional groups, it felt like what I was living was truth to not just me, but to a lot of people. They perceived me, and I was what a queer person is. I might have been the only queer person that they ever interacted with openly. And I felt like I had this weight on me that I needed to uphold some ideal, I don't even know what. And I felt like I couldn't experience my own identity because maybe that would be confusing to someone if the only queer person in their life kept changing their concept of who they are. So I felt this extreme pressure to be extremely concrete in my identity unwaveringly. And I just don't think that that was healthy for me. So to a young queer person, understand that it is okay to explore your identity and to ebb and flow through it, because there are a lot of different colors on the spectrum. And maybe you haven't seen them all yet. And when you see the one that really fits for you, then you can lean into that. And it might change someday. So be okay to that too.